Hi, my name is Alexander Jarman. I'm the Assistant Curator and Academic Liaison here at the Wellin Museum of Art, and today I'm going to take you around our new exhibition, Michael Rakowitz, Nimrud. And because I'm alone in the museum today, I'm also going to go ahead and take off my mask. I'm starting us here with 3 of our Assyrian fragments that are in our permanent collection. These are fragments that came from the site of Nimrud and entered the Wellin's collection in about 1868-1869. When our guest curator, Catherine Alkoskis, who used to be a curator here at the Wellin, saw that the work of Michael Rakowitz was riffing and responding to a lot of the recent destruction of important archaeological sites in Iraq, including Nimrud, she contacted the artist and asked if he'd like to make a piece in response to these 3 Assyrian fragments. And about 3 years after that first phone call, Michael has installed his work here at the museum. So let's go inside and we'll take a look at what he's installed at the museum. This is a series of works that Michael Rakowitz started making shortly after the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. During that invasion, there was a period of several days where there was no one in charge of the city of Baghdad in between the time when the Iraqi forces retreated from the city and the US forces moved into the city. During those several days, since there was no one guarding important institutions and buildings, a lot of looting of the Iraq Museum occurred. As part of that looting, several artworks were destroyed, several were stolen, and we don't have a really good sense of how many of those objects are still out there in the world and how many are lost forever. Michael has taken to recreating or reappearing all of the artworks that are on a list as missing or destroyed. And he was really inspired to create this particular format of display based on a photograph he saw of the then director of the Iraq Museum, Dr. Donnie George Yokana, coming back into the Iraq Museum after the US forces had resumed control of the area. And in that photograph, Dr. Donnie George Yokana is seen over a folding table, neatly putting objects back on the surface in order to just take an inventory of what was still there and what was gone. So this is a different display than you might usually see in a museum that has white pedestals and glass bonnets over top. And when the series was first presented, Dr. Donnie George Yokana actually viewed these works by Michael Rakowitz and contacted the artist to tell him that the way they were laid out was very counterintuitive to the way that he himself laid them out originally in that photograph that was seen in 2003. That inspired the artist, Michael Rakowitz, to relinquish all curatorial control of how objects in this series are laid out when they're presented at various institutions. Being that we are a teaching museum, we gave the opportunity to 2 of our student docents to choose how the objects would be laid out on the table, which they did so by organizing them according to geographic region. You'll also see that there is a slight bend in the table, and that mimics a very famous road that this series is named after, and that road goes through the Ishtar Gate in Babylon. So you will see that there are many layers of conceptual meaning embedded into this series. We're standing here inside a recreation of Room H from the ancient palace of Nimrud. You can see just from the scale behind me that the figures Michael has recreated from the palace walls are slightly larger than life size. These reliefs would surround the people that were in the room 360 degrees, and there were depictions of the king himself and the Apkalus, or winged deities, that were his protectors. You'll notice that these are very brightly colored panels They are created from collaging different food wrappers that Michael sources from neighborhood grocery stores and bodegas around Chicago, where he lives and works. And these are particularly stores that cater to newly arrived immigrants from Middle Eastern countries. You'll also notice that all of these panels are accompanied by some text at the top. Each of these pieces of text designates the archaeological number that has been assigned to these panels, but they also include a couple of very important pieces of information. One is their status, and by that I mean, are they destroyed or are they still in existence, but perhaps in an institution in some other country outside of Iraq? And the other piece of text that they contain are stories, quotes from people who lived in and around Nimrud at the time it was destroyed in 2015 by members of ISIS. So you'll particularly be able to note that there are blank areas in this room, and those designate that the panels which would normally be there are still in existence in other museums across the world. So Michael will not be recreating or reappearing those panels. This room was used when it was first constructed as a religious and ceremonial space where sacrifices might occur, but it was also a festive place where feasts would have occurred for special guests to the palace. This is our education space that accompanies the exhibition. Over on my left, we have 3 maps that help contextualize where we are talking about in terms of Nimrud. So you have a map that lays out the ancient Assyrian Empire, which would now be parts of Iraq, Iran, Syria, Turkey. You have a map of the city of Nimrud when it was first constructed, highlighting the Northwest Palace. And then the final map there highlights Room H within the Northwest Palace at Nimrud. We've also commissioned an original video that documents the artist's studio practice and also contains a brand new interview with him about the work he's presented here at the Wellin. Directly behind me are iconographic panels that break down what the different pieces of imagery within the panels of Room H actually mean. We also have a shelf here that somewhat mimics a grocery store shelf, and they contain the exact items that Michael uses to collage and then apply to his panels. And finally, on my right, we have a timeline. And that timeline maps out the important dates not only in Assyrian history, but all the way up to the present, talking about some of the events such as the 2 Gulf Wars that have informed Michael's practice and also inspired him to embark on this process of recreating or reappearing lost works from the palace at Nimrud.